It's become almost a pastime, almost a sport in American politics today that whatever party is not in power in the White House wants to talk about impeaching the president of the party that is in the White House. And oftentimes it's just kind of an eye rolling kind of a thing where it's like clear they're just looking for whatever to try to demonize the guy and to say, oh, he needs to be impeached. And they just use this stuff all over the place and get him out of office. But what happens if the situation where there might actually be some valid concerns for that, whether impeachment or something else, it's time to actually look beyond the politics and to look at some things that really have an impact on our national security when it comes to the commander in chief of the armed forces. And that's what we're going to look at today. I want to bring something to your attention here that we don't talk about too much because I like to stay out of those things when it's just kind of a he said, she said, or it's just mudslinging from one side to another. There's plenty of places for that. But when something has some potential ramifications on your national security, you can bet that Daniel Davis Deep Dive is going to be right there to bring it to you. And today is a perfect example of that. Now, on one of our shows a few days back, we showed an example of something that President Biden had said when he was asked about a potential ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel. And the Hamas had come out with a proposal, I believe it was on the 6th of this month. And they were at a press conference. President Biden was asked about it. And at the time, I told you I was a little concerned, actually very concerned, because he seemed to completely lose his train of thought in the middle of the sentence. And we talked about how that was a problem. In case you didn't see that episode, here's that clip.
There is some movement, and I don't want to, well, maybe choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas, but it seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is. There's a continuing negotiation right now.
Now, I showed you that entire clip because what you're going to see here are some other clips about President Biden, how he's answering some questions. And I've noticed that in the mainstream media, primarily, when they put things on there, they'll just put like 3 or 4 seconds of when he says a certain thing. And they won't mention this part about where this is becoming all the more common and how he engages with people. And that's why it's important to understand. And let me just say from the outset, this is not any kind of a bash President Biden thing. This is not anything against the Democrats at all. This is for American people, that we need to know that whoever is occupying that office, even if you disagree with them strongly, that's not even relevant here, but that the person has the mental capacity to do an exceptional job, to do a good job. And if they can't do even a minimal task, then we have to start saying, hey, hang on a second, something needs to change here. And I believe that's where we are. And I'm going to show you why as we go on here. Now, 2 days after he made that statement, and after we had talked about our concerns during the show, the special counsel who had been hired to look into the Biden administration, President Biden himself, because of alleged mishandling of the classified information, that's kind of been going on in the background for quite a while now. And a couple of days ago, the Washington Post published a story that said, hey, they have chosen not to prosecute. Now, we may talk about that at a subsequent time about what that was, because it's curious about some of the language in there about how they acknowledge that he did things that were illegal, but they're not going to press charges. But part of the reason in that same letter that I showed you a second ago there, one of the things he said that the reason they chose not to was because, quote, we have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Based on our direct interactions with and observances of him, he is someone for whom many juries will want to identify reasonable doubt. It would be difficult to convene a jury that they should convict him, by then a former president well into his 80s, with a serious felony that requires a mental state of willingness. Now, let that sink in for a second. the prosecutor is saying that we don't want to put him on trial because that would stress him and he would not be able to recall things. And so because we don't want to put an elderly man on the stage on the trial, then we're not going to prosecute. That's the man that now has the reins of the United States, who has the nuclear launch codes, who's the one that's making war and peace decisions on numerous opportunities, the southern border issue, our budget issue, all kinds of things that are on the duties of state. And we want to say, on the one hand, he can't conduct a trial, but on the other hand, well, I mean, obviously this letter did not address that. That's not what it was for, but that obviously is the question that we certainly need to be asking. And you can see it's already all over the internet here. Now, obviously, as you might expect, President Biden didn't like that. His people didn't like it. His supporters didn't like that. So he held an impromptu press conference just last night to try and explain some of this stuff and to say that's a bunch of nonsense. I'm going to show you 2 or 3 clips from that. Here's the first one.
Something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally out.
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak. That's
Do you feel your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
You can see what you're going to see there is a consistent pattern that's going to be expanded even in the context of this same press conference here. But you see that you can kind of see some confusion on his face, like things don't seem to make sense. And then even what he says is illogical. It doesn't make any sense. Oh, my memory is so bad, I'll let you talk. What? How are those things even related? That doesn't make any sense. So he's not building a good case for himself. Now, the next time, one of the other things that this letter mentioned specifically in there was that President several times didn't remember when his son was had died. He thought it was in 1 year, didn't even get the year right. You know, so they said that would seem to be something you would remember. Says he didn't remember when he was in office. He was confused at some points, but whether he was the vice president or the president. These are some major issues here. But when pressed specifically about his son, understandably, he took that personal because of the emotional ties. But notice again in his answer how things kind of stumble around.
Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented. I wear, since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of. Every Memorial Day, we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or passed away. Simple truth is, I sat for 5 hour interview over 2 days of events, going back 40 years. At the same time, I was managing international crisis.
See, an interesting thing there. So he pulls up this rosary he has on his wrist, and he says, "You know, we got this from Our Lady." And you know, and then literally in mid sentence, he just loses his train of thought, and he stops speaking. And for a few seconds, he's just staring blankly into the air. Then he continued on there, and then his speech is slurred and mumbled over to where he compressed probably entire words because it didn't really make a lot of sense what he said in that answer there. So again, it's kind of something that's not helping his case and not making people think, yes, he can get this done. And as we're going to see, this is not something new. These are things that have been happening over time. And look, we're not talking about you make a mistake or you fumble over your words. That happens to every single public speaker. You've seen me do that on air sometimes. I make those sometimes fumbling mistakes here. We're not talking about that. That's incumbent on everybody. What we're talking about is when you can't even remember basic facts, like whether you're the president or the vice president, or what you were doing when you were in Afghanistan as the vice president, or as it turns out, as you'll see in this next clip, what country a certain leader is from. And we're not talking about inadvertently saying Iran instead of Iraq or something like that, but, well, we'll let him put it in his own words.
in the Gaza Strip has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I'm pushing very hard now to deal with this hostage ceasefire because, I've been working tirelessly in this deal. How can I say this without revealing it? To lead to a sustained pause in the fighting.
Look, you see there, he says the president of Mexico instead of the president of Egypt. That's not a mistake that you can make. You can't get those two countries confused, but he did. And then even when he's explaining further, you see again, you see consistency here. He's in the middle of a sentence and you see his face kind of go blank and he loses train of thought and he tries to pick it back up and go somewhere else. And that's also not the only time he's gotten countries mixed up, as The Hills Rising pointed out just a couple of days ago on a different topic.
One such reason for the precipitous drop in Biden's approval are ongoing concerns surrounding Biden's mental fitness for the job. Now, during a recent campaign stop, Biden referenced a meeting he had with Mitterrand from Germany after being elected. One small problem, actually a couple small problems. Mitterrand was the French president, and he died in 1996. Take a look.
People have pled guilty. Right after I was elected, I went to what they call a G7 meeting, all the NATO leaders. It was in the south of England. And I sat down and I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from France looked at me and said, how long are you back for?
Compounding concerns of Biden's mental health failures seem to be his unwillingness to do interviews. As Variety reports, President Joe Biden will not take part in an exchange during the pregame festivities leading up to the CBS broadcast of the next Super Bowl on February 11th.
Again, during that clip there where they played President Biden, you could see that two times in those few short seconds that we had him on there is his face just locked up. And no words came out, like he's trying to find words or he's just zoned out. I don't know. But I mean, twice within the span of like 10 seconds that happened. And he just can't figure out. He's using the wrong name for somebody who's been dead since the 90s for a current leader of Germany. You just can't think that it's okay to make that mistake. That's indicative of a problem. The last part I included on there, though, where they were talking about the administration's unwillingness to accept what is the softball of all softball questions to go to have an interview on the day of the Super Bowl is indicative that his administrative team and the people who are handling him are also aware of how bad this is. I can assure you, in a presidential campaign, in the year of the election itself, there is no better place. It's a coveted thing to get to be interviewed on the day of the Super Bowl because potentially scores of millions of people are going to be watching. I mean, that's what everybody is going to be tuned in for that day, literally from all over the world, but definitely America. And it would be a fantastic thing to get your message out there when everybody that you want to reach is listening. People that ordinarily don't listen to politics stuff. The fact that they chose not to and rejected it tells you that they're concerned about him making public statements. And we already know that he is very limited in how many public statements he makes or when he allows the press to ask questions. And you see why, because last night when they did that very thing, it was problematic because even in his attempt to defend himself, he's actually providing more evidence that there is a serious problem. And look, this has been building for a long time. I'm going to show you something from just I believe it was the third month of his administration, when you see a very vibrant Biden in the middle of talking, and all of a sudden you see the same kind of things that we've been showing you show up. And you'll see this pause in he loses track of what he's talking about. He kind of zones out and then catches it back in and then runs on. So notice the difference between his vitality then, but you see the onset of that problem coming in before.
So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done. And if we have to, if there's complete lockdown and chaos.
So you can see just even in his the vitality part, just I mean his eyes are wide open, he's talking, but then he zones out and then he goes back in. As contrasted with the ones I just showed you a second ago from last night, to where there's no vitality anywhere, either before or after. And on the clip that I showed you at the outset, to where there was a long period where he just couldn't find any words at all. And he was just struggling to be able to say anything. Folks, these are not minor things. And look, in 2018, on Nora O'Donnell, President or then candidate Biden, who was running, was asked, hey, is age a question? And well, his answers then are probably a little different than today.
Is age a legitimate issue?
It is a legitimate issue. Sure it is. And I think people are going to judge it. If I were to run, I think they're going to judge me on my vitality. Can I still run up the steps of Air Force Two? Am I still in good shape? Do I have all my faculties? Am I energetic? I think it's totally legitimate for people to ask those questions.
And he was right then. It is totally legit. And again, I want to reiterate here because I think it's very important to get. This is not a hit piece. I don't have anything against President Biden that I would want him out of office at all. He was duly elected. He has every right to serve out his term. Whether I agree with him on any policy or not is secondary. He's the president of the United States and is due respect and honor. And I give that to everybody who's ever won the office and will, because that's what it's supposed to be a good citizen of our country. That even if your guy didn't win, then you support whoever it is because they're the elected president. But when there's an issue like this is a serious issue, because look, there's some issues going on the global stage right now that demand a president that is locked in and in charge and is running the show. There's potential that things in the Middle East could explode and we could end up in a war with Iran if we don't take the right actions here. There's obviously things going on in Russia and Ukraine that if we don't take the right actions, or if things go in a bad direction, that we could somehow find ourselves in a war that expands out of that too. We've been pretty good about it so far, but you have to be on your game to make sure that you don't make decisions that could unwittingly lead to a war. The situation in the Asia Pacific, is ongoing. Remember the first part of Biden's administration, he numerous times said that, yes, we would defend Taiwan if it came to a war, even though we don't have a mutual defense treaty. And then his people would walk that back. And so what he says matters. And if it gets to a crisis, and if it gets to something where Putin tries to test him, where Xi Jinping tries to test him, where the Ayatollah tries to test him, or Kim Jong-un in North Korea tries to test him and wants to see where he'll go, that's a problem if you're not locked in. And if it's a case where the president can't be locked in, or that he runs in these situations to where he just zones out. Look, it's one thing if it's a press conference, it's a little embarrassing. It's a second thing is if you're making war and peace decisions, maybe you're talking to a foreign head of state and you zone out. Folks, that's a problem. And there's people that are recognizing that. And you can say that the following is a politically motivated, and I can't say that it is or isn't based on who's the Republican that's making this statement. But I assure you, lots of people are thinking this right now, where GOP lawmakers is saying they have to explore the possibility of the 25th Amendment. I think you're going to be hearing that more and more in the next few days, because when you see Biden go on to defend himself, and he actually makes his situation a little worse by showing that, no, there really is some things that more people are going to talk about. And specifically in here, Representative Tenney said, it is incumbent upon you, this is sent to the Attorney General, to explore the proceedings to remove the president pursuant to the 25th Amendment of the United States Constitution. President Biden needs to be charged or he needs to be removed. There is no middle ground. That is something that is so weighty. It's never been done in American history. You know, a lot of people wanted to say that about Trump when he was in office. Oh, the 25th Amendment, because they didn't like the policies he was doing. They thought some of the stuff he was doing was off the wall, and there was talk about the 25th Amendment then. But this is a matter of capacity, not a policy. Not if he's doing with something that we don't like or something. This is, can he perform the function of his office? This isn't even about whether he should run in 2024 and serve another 4 years beyond that. I think that should just be completely off the table. And look, the Democrats are going to have to do something and make some hard decisions here, because I assure you, Republican or Democrat or independent, these questions are being asked around kitchen tables right now. People are discussing this. And it's going to continue on because these things typically don't go backwards. I talked to yesterday to a clinical psychologist who is trained in dementia. And in her opinion, this is going to get worse because these things are a degenerative condition. They don't get better. She said that she had both of her parents had it, so she had personally walked through it. She was trained in this, and she's got all the credentials and has served in roles. And she says she's been watching, of course, Biden since the beginning, all the way back during the campaign. And she's been watching this deterioration. And she believes that within 6 months, he might not even be able to carry on basic functions on a routine basis, not just on a periodic basis like this. I think that evidence out there is enough that the Democratic Party is going to have to give serious consideration to maybe President Biden may even need to resign. I don't think it does anybody any good, not the country, and certainly not the president, to continue on and pretend there's nothing wrong, or to force this into a situation where his own cabinet has to vote against him. I think that would be the worst thing that he could do. But the worst thing that could happen is that nobody does anything. We continue to pretend everything's fine. Folks, it's not fine. I mean, you can see with your own eyes. You don't need my interpretation. You can see it. There is something that's not right. And the longer it goes, I mean, you've probably all seen people with dementia and have their capacities deteriorate over time. It doesn't reverse. It doesn't get better. And this is the most challenging position on the planet. There is no more stressful position than the president of the United States. Again, it doesn't matter whether you ever like or dislike somebody or what their policies are, but the man that has occupied that position, there is no greater stress and pressure on him than it can be imagined. And especially when you add on top of that the rigors of a presidential campaign, while you have to do with stuff like the Israeli-Hamas war or the Russia-Ukraine war, issues with China, all of those things on your head all at the same time, it's just an enormous strain on somebody, and somebody who's clearly having some cognitive issues. It's just going to make it worse. And I don't think that President Biden deserves that. And I hope that his team is going to recognize this and do what's best for him and what's best for the nation, because the status quo is just not sustainable for anyone. That's your deep dive for today. We appreciate you staying with us here. We always value you guys when you come in. Be sure to like and subscribe. We remain unintimidated and uncompromised in bringing you the information that you need. Thanks. We'll see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.